Okay, I am back. Belly up the bar here. Let's chat a little bit more about this upcoming game. We are going to talk about when the Patriots have the football, and let's just dig right in. Again, this is a blend of things that happened last year and last week. You don't want to weight one way more than the other, but it's a weird time of year for evaluating games. A lot of stuff they did last year was really impressive, and when you go dig into this, kind of forgot how good New England's offense was last year. Really, up until their bye week in week 14, it was really, really good. Since then, it's been a disaster. Last week, it was a disaster. So what are we going to see on Sunday? I tend to think it's more disaster than it was pre-bye, but here we go. Last year, the Patriots scored 281 points at home and only 198 points on the road. And they played 9 home games away and 9 road games when you count their playoff loss. So obviously they're on the road, scored about 100 points less on the road last year than at home. Last year, only 5 offenses produced more points per game than New England, and the Chiefs produced points. Only the Chiefs produced points at a higher percentage of their offensive drives. Their efficiency shocked me, digging into this. So their offensive efficiency was great. And they were also one of the most explosive offenses in the league. Rushes of 10 yards or longer. New England was 4th. Pass plays resulted in 20 yards more. The Patriots were 3rd. The Niners were the only offense that produced explosive pass plays at a higher percentage of their dropbacks. And the Steelers' defense was the worst in the league last year in giving up explosive runs, as you might have remembered. I don't look at this offense and think explosive by their personnel. They're slow, but, that's what happened. 2021, the New England ran 23% of their offensive snaps out of 21 personnel, 2 backs, 1 tight end, with a fullback on the field with the running back. Traditional. Patriots don't even have a fullback on the roster this year. Big difference. Last year, the Patriots targeted the wide receiver position only 56% of the time. That was the 26th most in the league, near the bottom of the league. That was true even with Jacoby Myers accounting for about 24% of the target share. Jones targets Myers 50 more times than any other Patriots receiver. Myers has been targeted 207 times over the past 2 years, but only has found the end zone twice. And he's not really built for that. He's a slot type guy. Last year with the Dolphins, Devonte Parker averaged 7.3 targets per game. But this one's interesting to me. I'm a big yards per route run guy. Kendrick Bourne had the best yards per route run on the team, even though his depth of target was only 8.5 yards from the line of scrimmage. Myers' average depth of target came at 9.8 yards, but he was second in terms of yards per route run. Nelson Aguilar was 3rd in yards per route run for them, but was targeted much deeper downfield, almost 15 yards downfield. Parker's tough to call because he was with Miami, but he was kind of middle of the road with yards per route run, and his average target was about 12.5 yards downfield. And that's how they used him in week 1. Here's where I'm going with that is Parker never left the field last week. He participated in every one of New England's offensive snaps against his former team, the Dolphins. Myers was the next highest participant. He played 49 snaps. Aguilar played 33 snaps out of a possible 56 plays. Bourne had the second most receiving yards on the team, but he only ran 2 routes. And again, he was the guy that has the best yards per route run last year. I don't quite understand why these guys don't use Kendrick Bourne more often. Their tight end usage is interesting. I'm sure you remember they spent big money on Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, but they only got 190 snaps of Henry and Smith on the field together last year. I mentioned they don't have a fullback. You're going to see a lot more double tight end sets as long as these guys are healthy. If you look at all the tight ends in the league last year, Henry was 22nd in targets, 26th in receptions per game, but he was a red zone monster. He had a lot of targets in the red zone and ended up with, a lot of touchdowns. But the reality was he wasn't used that much. Smith only missed 1 game last year, but only saw the field on about half of the Patriots' offensive snaps. He was still targeted a high percentage in his routes, so maybe, that was kind of a fluky year for him. Last week, Henry and Smith combined for 7 targets, and Henry ran a route on 83% of Jones's dropbacks, which is also a very high percentage. I think their usage is really going to spike this year. Henry played 42 snaps last week. Smith played 39. We're going to see a lot more double tight end sets, of course. Last year, the Patriots receivers dropped only 14 passes. That was third best in the league. Let's get into Mac Jones here. Mac Jones led all rookies last year, 22 touchdown passes, and is 7.3 yards per pass attempt. That was best amongst all rookies. Not super surprising. He had a good situation. But since 2000, 61 rookie quarterbacks have attempted 250 passes or more. Of those 61 quarterbacks, Jones finished second in completion rate, 7th in passer rating, and 18th in yards per game. He had a really good rookie year. But the end was bad, as we'll get to here. Jones threw 30 passes against the Dolphins last week. None of his pass catchers was targeted more than 6 times. Yet 8 receivers were targeted 2 or more times, spreading the ball around. However, just 10 of Jones's passes traveled 10 yards or further past the line of scrimmage. He completed 4 of those attempts last week for 89 yards and an interception. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow last week against the Steelers attempted 5 passes of 20 or more air yards and completed just 1. Jamar Chase surprisingly was not targeted 20 or more yards downfield. So the Steelers did a good job with the deep ball. Jones struggled with the deep ball last week. New England ranked in the bottom 6 last year in passing percentage on early downs, very run heavy, when they were also in the bottom 6 when the game was within 1 score. As well as when they were trailing, they were still stuck with the run. They were in the top 8 in terms of running percentage in the first half of games, as well as on first downs. So, extremely run heavy last year, and we'll see if that keeps up or not. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to dig into their running back usage a little bit more and some other little nuggets as well. So Damien Harris is the number 1 in New England. But he's only caught 25 passes in his three NFL seasons. And over the last 2 years, I didn't look it up for last week, Harris only went out on a pass on a third down 7 times over the whole 2020 and 2021 season. Unbelievable. But he did run for 790 yards in his final 12 games. So finished the season strong. I think Ramondre Stevenson's the better player. He averages more yards after initial contact than Harris, and he also generates a higher percentage of runs gaining 10 yards or more. And he's substantially better in both those categories last year. They split the workload in week 1. Harris had 9 carries, 8 for Stevenson, but between the two of them, they only combined for 73 rushing yards. And 33% of the handoffs for New England failed to gain any yardage. 0 yards or more on 1/3 of their handoffs. That was the worst percentage in the entire week, and very concerning. Interesting, here's how the snap count worked, though, and this is going to change because Ty Montgomery just went on injured reserve. 22 snaps for Harris, 20 for Ty Montgomery, 14 for Stevenson. I'm guessing Stevenson gets a huge spike and maybe gets the majority of those Montgomery snaps, particularly in the passing game. He's a much better receiver than Harris. I mean, Montgomery ran a route on 13 plays. He was only in the field for 20. Harris ran 10 routes. Stevenson only went out for a pass on 4 occasions. So on third downs, Montgomery was out there 8 of the 9 third down opportunities. I think that's going to go to Stevenson. Last week, Joe Mixon was targeted 9 times. Samaje Perine was thrown on 5 occasions. That was a 26% target share for the Bengals running back and a very large target share against the Steelers. Jamar Chase was targeted 16 times. He caught 10 for 129 and a touchdown, as you remember. But no other wide receiver finished the game with more than 33 receiving yards. I meant to put this out there before, is the combination of Harris, the running back, and Henry, the tight end. They scored 24 of the Patriots' 35 offensive touchdowns last year. You see where the ball's going when they're near the goal line. The Bills and Colts were the only offenses that began their drives with better average starting field position than New England last year. That's certainly a Belichick thing. On a per-drive basis, the Patriots produced the 9th most yards in the league last year, but Pittsburgh's defense was 10th best, so pretty cool there. Here's some stuff we talked about before. Robert Spillane was only on the field for 29% of the Steelers' defensive snaps last week, but he was used for 52% of the third and fourth down plays. Miles Jack ended up playing 89% of all the defensive snaps. 87%, I'm sorry. A lot of people don't give Terrell Edmonds a lot of credit, and I'm not saying he's great, but what they ask of him is rare, and it's very Derwin James-like. And here's just an illustration of that. Is against the Bengals, between 28 and 32% of his snaps were all shared in the slot, in the box, and as a deep safety. So he really played 3 different positions almost exclusively. And they did that to him last year too. Like there was a lot of these same numbers when the Chargers re-signed Derwin James that Edmonds was the only other safety used the same way. And I'm not saying he's Derwin James, but I'm just in terms of usage, he's asked to do more than people think. Speaking of slot, Arthur Millette was in the slot for about 92% of the snaps he was on the field. I mean, he is a slot-only guy. A couple Patriots bigger notes here. The Patriots have made 5 selections in the first round of the NFL draft since 2018. All have been on offensive players. Last week in Cincinnati, Steelers blitzed Burrow on 12% of his dropbacks, which is not a very high number, and the sacks and the results. So getting home without blitzing is awesome. Okay, here's another little Patriot nugget from week 1. The Panthers and Patriots were the only offenses in the league that only used 2 personnel groupings. They were either an 11, 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. That was 28 plays. Or they were in 12, 1 back, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers for 26 plays. So basically 50-50, 2 personnel groupings. That's all you get. And again, they don't even have fullback on the roster anymore. They used to be one of the heaviest fullback teams in the league. Here's another little nugget, and it applies, unfortunately. The snaps last week that TJ Watt was not on the field, the Steelers gave up 4.6 yards per play, which is very good, to be honest with you. And it's exactly what they gave up for the whole game. So yards per play wasn't worse, wasn't better, the snaps that Watt was not out there. I just thought that was a little interesting nugget. 3 little special teams things here. Nick Falk was one of the best in the league last year. He made 92% of his kicks. Chris Boswell, 90% is a big number. He's gone 3 straight years, of making at least 90% of his field goals attempts. And he has also made 90% or better in 5 of Boswell's 7 seasons. I know some of you guys got a kick out of my stat last week about the Bengals' very fortunate field goal luck. And again, when the opponent kicks the football, it really doesn't matter if you're good or not if it goes through the uprights. There's something I very much believe in, of field goal luck. And the Bengals were like one of the absolute luckiest teams in the league last year with their opponent's ability to make field goals. Not as lucky as New England, though. New England's opponents tried 33 field goals and only made 22 of them. And so 66% of your kicks gets any kicker in the league, immediately fired. You do not last the league making 2/3 of your kicks. And there wasn't one place kicker that made 66% of his kicks or worse that lasted in the league more than 5 games last year. So very, very fortunate. And actually 3 of those misses also came within 40 yards. And the Patriots opponents missed 3 extra points last year. So they either played terrible kickers or they were tremendously lucky in that regard. And that's a lot of points when you start adding it up in a lot of close scoring games. So that's the end of today's show. I think the last 2 days gave you a pretty good idea in a nerdy manner of what the Patriots are, how this matchup is. Tomorrow we'll dig into more individual matchups, predictions, stuff like that too. I think it's going to be a battle. I'm looking forward to it. Also really looking forward to Chiefs-Chargers as well. I think that's a true heavyweight fight. So we'll talk to you later. Over and out.